All right, peeps. Like, I have been counting down this for months and then weeks and then days. I am so excited to introduce you to my improv teacher. But maybe 3 years ago is when I started. I signed up. I was on a wait list and I got into we have a local theater in Ambler, Pennsylvania, where Will, who I had seen as an elf in a Christmas show, but didn't realize he was the same person at the time. I took his class and I got addicted and stayed really engaged until the shutdown. But, one of the things that Will does is he brings his improv to corporate, and a subset of that is for sales. So I asked him to do this for our membership, and he so graciously said yes. Will Dennis, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a delight to be here. Anytime I get a chance to sort of geek out collectively over improv with a group of people, I'm on board. And the opportunity to share some of the stuff that I've picked up along the way, to share some of the stuff that has made a difference in my own life, and then to sort of be in the same room as other people. I don't know if it was Bob or Phil, someone just said the opportunity to learn from other people, right? And that's the beauty of improv, is that's what it's all about. It's about this spirit of collaboration, the spirit of collective thinking, right? Groupthink is a term that you might hear me drop at some point today. So what I want to do, what the hope is, that we unpack the 5 tenets of improv that I use. So Phil, you probably have some that you picked up along the way that are different. Bob, you probably picked up some at IO that are a little bit different. Anyone who's taken an improv class, these will sound familiar, but these are the 5 that over the course of about 15 years, I've whittled down and used these 5 in talking about improv, but specifically this idea of applied improvisation. So when we say applied improvisation, we're talking about exactly what Bryn said in this introduction. It's that idea of taking the tenets of improv and then figuring out ways to apply them to any area of your life, really. So specifically today, business, sales, things like that. But the one thing that I like to think about is, for me in business, so I own a place called Unscripted Productions, which is an improv studio. I'm also a teacher, a classroom. I'm coming to you from a classroom of mine right now. So if you're like, why does he have an American flag up there? Because I love our country, but also this is my classroom space. And when it comes to business, when it comes to anything, I like to think of it as everything is relationships, right? Everything that we do is relationships. And improv has also taught me everything about that, about relationships, whether it's my own marriage, whether it's relationship with my children, my peers, my colleagues in the business world, whatever it is, it all boils down to relationships. So we'll sort of look at it through the lens of relationships, and then look at it specifically through the lens of business and try to apply some of these things. So we don't have a ton of time, so I'm going to unpack those 5 tenets with you. We'll do some interaction. I'll call on some of you to participate on a small, very safe scale. There are some people who have improv experience. For those who don't, I would imagine when you hear improv, you want to sort of throw up or dig a hole and hide, because we all have that fear of walking into a theater and somebody saying, and now for the audience participation portion of the show, right? And then everyone makes eye contact with their shoes at that point. So I'm not here to terrify anyone. I'm not here to induce sweat or anything like that. I'm here just to pass a few things on, and then hopefully you find them valuable. So I'm going to share my screen for a little bit, just to walk through these tenets. I don't want it to feel too much like a presentation. I'd much rather it feel like a conversation. So we'll dive into that, but I want us to be able to download these things together, and then we'll go from there. I think Bill is putting in the chat too. There's some resources that I've shared that are for you. So I've shared this deck that I'm going to use right now. I also shared 3 ways that improv can change the way that you work. And I also shared a sort of our menu of our tenants. So those things are available for you. And if there's anything else you need, by all means, reach out and I'm happy to share absolutely anything. So
Awesome.
Here's
While
what-
you're sharing your screen, when it comes time to engage, use the reaction button to raise your hand. So that way we'll get people in order. So at the bottom, where you share your screen, there's a little reaction button. And then at the bottom of that is raise hand. So I'm gonna, yeah, just like Phil's like, I want to go first. Right. So you could raise your hand and then we'll all know who's next in line. So that's great. Back to you, Will.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Brent. So we're going to look at these 5 tenets. I love using this image because it's a group of people together jumping out of a plane and skydiving. That's what it can feel like sometimes with improvisation. It feels like you're sort of launching yourself. A great way that I heard of someone describe improv was building a plane together when it's already mid-flight. And that's really what it's all about, is this collaboration, the spirit of collaboration in all sorts of scenarios, but it's effectively doing that. The way that I like to talk about improv and to define it for all of us, right? For every human being, whether you've taken 6 years of classes or if you haven't spoken in a week, right? Is creating something together that never existed before. That's all we ever set out to do with improvisation. We're going to do something together. So there's a collaborative piece and we're going to create. Now, here's the thing. There's nothing in this definition, if you see it, that says hilariously create something that never existed before, quickly create something that never existed before, wittily create something that never existed before. It's merely about creation. So too often people will hear some of these ideas and go, well, that's great for somebody else, but that's not me. I'm not quick. I'm not witty. I'm not funny. I'm not any. The only thing you have to be able to improvise is human. So I'm going to make a bold assumption and say that everyone has already sort of hit that prerequisite. So as long as you're a human being, you're going to be able to improvise and you're going to be able to take these things and apply them to what you do. So our first tenet, you already heard Phil shout it with enthusiasm. You heard Bryn mention it. It's this idea of yes and, okay? This idea of yes and. There has been no phrase in my life that has more of an impact than the phrase yes and. So I discovered improv at a young age. I started performing with it, but it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I recognized this idea of applied improv and the impact it could have in my life. So it has gotten to the point now where improv is very much a life philosophy of mine, mostly informed by this one phrase of yes and the game changer, to quote Bryn, that it's been in my life in all avenues. A quick aside, even before we dive into this, because it literally just happened. So I taught a class about a half an hour ago, and I teach world religions for those that are interested. So all world religions. And a student told me that she was writing her essay for acceptance into a university. I won't name the university. And she said, the question is, talk about the thing you believe to be the most true. And she told me that she's going to talk about yes and in her college essay because we use it in class all the time. And she's like, it's the most true thing that I've ever heard. So I hope that you can borrow this and have it be the most true thing that you've ever experienced as well. When you boil it down, it's about acceptance and contribution, building, participation. But it's 2 parts, right? Notice it's not just yes, and sometimes that can get lost. It's not just about saying yes to everything. We can't do that. I'm sure you all know that, especially in the workforce. You can't say yes to everything. You can't be a yes person unless you want to burn out. The idea of yes and is about acceptance and participation or contribution. And what it means is, I'm going to look you in the eye. I'm going to be on the other side of the table as you, and I'm going to recognize that there is value in what you are offering me. Somebody said it earlier, any idea has 10%, at least 10% of real goodness there. And if we're able to take that 10%, even if it is just 10%, and then add our own idea that might have 10%, we're slowly going to build up to that 100%. We're slowly going to build up to an idea that has been participated, contributed, and made as strong as possible through this notion of first accepting and then being willing to participate in the creation of a stronger idea. And that is a huge element. It's the willingness to participate and or contribute in the creation of a stronger idea. A couple of cool things happen with this. One, it is to this day the best brainstorming method I've ever encountered. And you end up getting great ideas. But two is, if we do it well, if we yes and well, by the time we get to the finished product, nobody remembers whose idea it was. And like, that is everything. If you can get to a place where it is agreed upon that a product, an end product, is phenomenal, is ready to go, and nobody remembers whose idea it was, that is collaboration. That is pure collaboration. And you remove that sort of tit for tat one-upmanship. So we're going to see one yes and in action in a couple of minutes. The second one that I use is this notion of give yourself up for the good of the team. So this is when people sometimes go like, oh, it's a little kumbaya. I don't know who this guy is. Yeah, selflessness. Well, that's not real. Fine, right? You can feel that way. 100%. I get that. It is about selflessness. But more than that, what I like about this tenet here is, for my money, which isn't a ton, there is no greater roadblock to creation, creativity, productivity than judgment. More specifically than that, of self-judgment. So on a typical day, Bryn mentioned that she first saw me as an elf. It's a little bit lost in translation, because if you saw me in person, I am a whopping 5'5", right? On a good day. That's if I'm standing up straight, which is rare. So it kind of makes sense. But the reason I share that is, on a given day, before I even leave my house, the things I think about are the fact that I'm 5'5", the fact that I have bushy eyebrows, right? The fact that since pandemic started, I learned to make sourdough and it's all gone to my waist. All of those things I think about before I leave the house. I'm judging myself constantly because I have the time and the permission to think about myself. In improv, if we ascribe to this, if we agree, okay, my number one job is to make somebody else look good. If my number one job today is to make Bryn look good, and I'm committing to that, I'm saying all I have to do today, all right, what am I going to do to put Bryn in a position to look amazing? If that's 100% of my energy, then I don't have time to think about myself. I don't have time to judge myself. I don't have time to think about these eyebrows, right? I don't have time to think about how short I am. None of that has a place. And what I get in return is, depending on how large my team is, I got 6 people whose number one job is to make me look good. So not only am I not getting my own way by judging myself, I now have an entire team that has said, all right, we'll buy into this too, and we'll do everything to make you look good. And then what slowly starts to happen over the course of time is that if we commit to making everyone else look good besides ourselves, our team looks good. Nobody stands out in a way that is a weak link, because everyone is lifting up everyone, because that's our job. And then we're not thinking about ourselves. So there's not that energy of, I need to cut so-and-so down so that I can get to the top. That gets removed. So it's very countercultural in that way, right? We live in a world of no, we live in a world of self-interest. This is proposing something completely countercultural. The next one, make statements. So this has been revised like 100 times. And by 100, I mean probably 2, but still. So it's this idea, we used to call this don't ask questions. And then we would say, oh, avoid asking questions. And then it dawned on me that questions are such an important part of a learning process, an important part of a team process. We need the ability to ask questions. So what we talk about instead is the encouragement to make statements. So if you can phrase a question as a statement, do it. Because what we do when we make a statement is that we offer someone something. There's a gift that exists in a statement. Here's what I believe. Here is this. It allows someone, it puts somebody in the position to be able to yes and. Often, if we ask a question, we're actually saying to someone, can you give me a gift? Can you provide something for me, right? Nobody likes somebody who asks for gifts. We really like people who give gifts, right? 'Tis the season. It's like, oh, we love gift givers. The generosity of offering something, as opposed to somebody who continually asks for things. So a real simple example that I'll just use to the computer screen. I don't need anyone specifically. It's the difference if I said to someone, hey, what's this? So if I said to you, yeah, Phil, what's this? Well, Phil sits there and now Phil has to do all of the work. Phil goes like, if he's anything like me, he goes like this, his back starts sweating. And it's like, what do you mean? But I don't, and all of the pressure is on Phil. The onus is on Phil to create. As opposed to if I say to Phil, hey, I want you to have this apple. Well, now he has an apple. He can do whatever he wants with that apple. He can yes and that. He can cut it into slices. He can throw it back at me, hit me in the head. Whatever he wants to do, he can do. But I've given him something instead of asked for something from him. So we see this in not only in brainstorming, but in meetings a ton as far as the workplace goes. It avoids those things and it forces us to sort of put our convictions out on the table in a way that we can move forward. And it avoids the vagueness of dancing around something, even if it's a tough topic. It avoids that vagueness of, well, I don't know, do we really want to do X, Y, or Z? And then it's a long conversation about it. And then you get to an end to a meeting and you feel like you haven't accomplished anything. As opposed to someone just dropping a conviction in there and making a statement of, we're going to do this. And then it allows people to yes and on that, make statements.
Can I ask a quick question? Maybe a little clarification almost. So if I went in and say, look, I have this idea. I was thinking about doing this, this, and this. What are your thoughts? Does that do that? Is that?
Yeah, but I mean, and Brenda, it depends on what your work environment is specifically. But I guess what I would argue is that the what are your thoughts is ultimately a needless question. You're going to get the thoughts from your team, right? You exist in this team that collaborates with one another. So I'm almost begging you to be less polite, which is kind of ironic, right? We just talked about selflessness and now I'm saying be less polite. But I'm saying that's why we exist. That's why we're on a team, is to, if we have already agreed to yes and we've already agreed to look out for one another, then we don't need that question. What we need is, whatever the thing is right. So we're going to do this. I've done this research. We should do this. I don't need to ask you what your thoughts are, because right away you're going to go, okay, I'm willing to accept that. Let's see how we can make it stronger. As opposed to, well, what are your thoughts? Well, what is that? Opens up a whole conversation. Or what are your thoughts? Well, I don't really know. I think maybe, remember Bob from marketing earlier was saying that we can't do X, Y, or Z. When that question comes along, you're really opening up a door with, hey, how many people want to say no to this before we actually get back to where it started in the first place?
I love that. I get that. I get it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So they'll,
Cool.
and they know to do yes and. So if I say, hey, I'm looking to do this, this, and this, and I get quiet, then Bob from marketing goes, yes. And to do that, we might need to do this. And then Bill says, okay, so I totally get it.
Nice. And that's, they're all dependent upon one another. So in a vacuum, to say make statements, sure, that's not going to be totally effective, because we haven't already agreed to this idea of acceptance and contribution and this idea of a focus on improving the team. Good. It's not in this deck, but it's going to be in another one. I must have opened the wrong one here, but it doesn't ultimately matter. So the next time we talk about is actually my favorite. Somebody mentioned studying at IO, and I'm stealing this directly from them. So a couple of years ago, my wife, who happens to be the best human being I've ever met, and if you ever meet her, tell her I said that, is because she's awesome. She flew me out to Chicago a couple of years ago so that I could sort of spend a long weekend studying. And I went to IO and I studied with a group called Beer Shark Mice, which is an improv team. And they had flown in actually from LA, but they were teaching at IO at the time. And there's an adage in improv that is super important. I'm almost grateful that it's not on the screen, that there are no mistakes in improv. And this is another one that we have rephrased a number of times. The notion that there are no mistakes in improv. There can make no mistakes. That's true, and I believe that wholeheartedly. When it comes to applied improvisation, sometimes that's a tough one for people to leap to, because they're like, what are you talking about? My life is littered with mistakes, right? I'm measured by my mistakes. That's the world we live in right now. We're waiting for people to make mistakes. So what I stole from them is that they won't use the word mistakes, they'll use the word fumbles. And what we'll say is that mistakes are fumbles, which are opportunities. And it's glorious. And the reason they use the word fumbles is because of a football analogy, right? In life, we crawl back into our skin when mistakes happen. In life, we freeze when mistakes happen. In life, we try to pretend that mistakes don't happen when they happen. In football, if someone fumbles, what happens? Everyone on the field goes after the ball. Everyone pounces on the opportunity. So the second that fumble happens, everyone is conditioned to see it as an opportunity and is conditioned to pick it up. This is something that is enormous in improv because guess what? Mistakes, as we would define them, do happen. And I would say 90% of the time, when a mistake happens in improv, it turns into gold. It is the moment that audiences remember. It is the moment that teams remember because it's the unexpected, the molecules in the room change, and something happens. We made a mistake and we had a choice. We had a choice to freeze and call attention to the mistake, or we had an opportunity to pick it up. And when we pick it up, something comes from that mistake. Something is born from that mistake that never would have happened if we followed the safe, formulaic way of approaching, right? If we didn't take any risks, nothing, it was like, all right, well, we know this works, so we'll just follow that. Well, if you do that, this is your avenue for growth. But if you're willing to make mistakes, if you're willing to take chances that you could fall on your face, trusting that those mistakes are fumbles which can turn into opportunities, that's when it opens the door for the unknown, right? The unknown, the unexpected. So that's my favorite, the idea of calling these things fumbles, because it is. I've never seen a football game. I'm a pretty avid fan, though I've never played myself. I've never seen a football game where somebody fumbles and everyone goes, ah! Right? It just doesn't happen. Instead, everyone's like, boom, pounce. Literally, you can see everybody just pounce on this one small ball. That's what we want to do. We want to see these things as opportunities and pounce as best we can. So Bill, I'll be sure to go ahead.
Before you move on, I just want to give it like a real world example for a moment. A long time ago, I can't remember, maybe 2 years ago, we sent out an email and all the links were broken. And I was feeling absolutely nauseous. And then we sent out an oops email to say, oops, all the links are broken. And we had more engagement on that email than we ever have and ever have since. So it's like, so the idea is we pounced instead of going, well, I did start with, but then we pounced, right? And it ended up working out great. So I just wanted to share that kind of real world experience of how that thinking can turn to gold.
Yeah, I feel like that's an awesome example. Thanks for sharing that, Bren. And it's, I'm sure all of us have hit reply all by accident at some point. And I've done that on a number of occasions. I once did it and it incorporated saying less than kind things about a serious donor to a nonprofit organization. And it wasn't like terrible things, to be clear, but it was kind of calling out that person, thinking I was only talking to somebody at the nonprofit. I don't know if it's what this person needed to hear, if it was something that like made them look at themselves, but the donation that then came in was twice as much that was asked for. So like, I'm going to go ahead and take credit for that one until I die. But it was a moment where I realized I sent reply all and I was dry heaving because I was so upset. And then it ultimately ended up working out. So who knows? Or it was just divine intervention. So the last one, the fifth one here, this is a newer one, and it's borrowed from a number of different companies, but I like it a lot. It's bring a brick. And I think it's really important in today's day and age to have this one incorporated. And the continuation of that phrase is bring a brick, we'll build the cathedral together, right? Bring a brick, we'll build the castle together, whatever it is. But it's liberating for me because it removes the pressure of feeling like you have to show up every day with the entire thing figured out. So in improv, you can't do this. You just can't do it. I have shared the stage with people who have thought that they can do this, and you cannot do it. You cannot bring an entire cathedral into a game or a scene and then also yes and someone. It's impossible to do. It is absolutely impossible to do. So if you think of it from the business world, I'm sure we all know these people. None of them are on the call, to be sure, right? But we all know those people that bring an entire cathedral into a meeting, into a session, into a, even into a sales pitch, whatever it is. And because they brought their entire cathedral, you can't bring your own brick, let alone expect them to yes end. Because what they will yes end is anything that gets back to their cathedral, right? So it's, I've already brought all of this in. I'm only interested in hearing ideas that support the cathedral that I brought into the meeting. As opposed to, all right, I'm going to bring a brick. I'm committed to this notion that we're doing this together, that we're building a house together, that we're building a cathedral together. But here's what I have to offer. And that changes every day. There are days when what you have to offer is a really, really solid first idea. There are days when what you have to offer is just the ability to listen. There are days when all you have to offer is presence, right? It's my brick is showing up today because I was convinced it wasn't going to happen up until this point. Whatever that is okay. And it liberates us from that pressure of feeling like we have to have it all figured out. And this is, I mean, talk about something that transcends, improv, but also business of anything. Relationships. This has been such a huge thing for a relationship, specifically mine, is this notion of, all right, who I am today and what I can contribute is enough. And together we're going to turn it into whatever it needs to be. So this is one that I love that we've just sort of recently introduced. So, okay, we are going to interact a little bit here, and we're going to interact in a way to see yes and come to life in some small steps here. Brynn alluded to this a little bit earlier. It was the first interaction she had with yes and what she ultimately saw as a game changer. So we're going to do this. And what I'm actually going to do is breakout rooms might be too tough. So I'm going to have some folks, just 2 at a time, volunteer to help me out. I'm going to stop sharing my screen just for now, and then we'll get back to that in a second. So if I could have 2 people who are willing to help out here. All right, Melanie, and do I see any other hands? This is real easy stuff. Oh, I got 3 hands raised here. All right. I'm trying to see who it even is. All right, let's do Melanie and Phil for this first round, if that's okay. Melanie and Phil. And let me see, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to spotlight the 2 of you. Okay. And I'll stay on the spotlight with you just for moral support, really more than anything else, to support you. So here's the deal.
God bless you.
I mentioned earlier that in addition to running unscripted productions, I'm also a classroom teacher. And what that should mean to you, a small business owner and a classroom teacher, specifically a Catholic school teacher. So what you should be thinking to yourself right now is, wow, Will is pretty poor, right? He has no money. I also have 2 kids, so I just got poorer in the last 30 seconds. So as a result of that, I've got a couple other gigs that I do to help make ends meet. And one of them is I design apps for Apple, right? I design new apps to be used on the iPhone. And I was on my way to work this morning. They called me. They're like, "Hey, we need a brand new app." I was like, "Look, I don't have time. I'm going to go teach, and then I'm doing this really cool workshop with the good folks at Social Sales Link. So like, I don't know if this is going to fit in." And then I was like, "Oh, wait a second. I'm going to have 45 of the most interesting creative people that I've never met before, all in the same place. I could probably use them to help." And Apple was like, "Yeah, that's fine. It's totally fine." Tim Cook said, "That's cool." And I was like, "Okay, then I'll use them to help." So here's what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you for your help in developing a new app. Okay. Just needs to be an app, but there are a couple of rules. One is the first person is going to start with an idea, and then everything after that needs to begin with the word no. So you're going to go back and forth to try to develop this idea, but everything after the first idea needs to begin with the word no. So for instance, if I said, "Oh, it should be a weather app," and I was playing with my imaginary self here, this imaginary Will would say, "No, it should be an ice cream app." And then I might say, "No, it should be a dog walking app," and so on and so forth. So you're going to go back and forth. Melanie, I'm going to ask you to offer the first idea of what the app should be, and go back and forth. And everything after the first idea needs to begin with the word no. So you're going to say, "No, and then offer something else. Is that clear, Melanie and Phil?
No.
Awesome. Awesome. Perfect. Now I know it is clear. Now here's the other thing. Okay. You only have 45 seconds starting now. So go.
I'd like to, Phil, let's create an app to create peace, more peace in the world.
No, it should be an app for more love in the world.
No, it should be an app for more positivity in the world.
No, it needs to be inclusive in the world.
No, it needs to be multicultural.
No, it needs to cover everybody.
No, it needs to cover everybody and everybody in a future generation.
No. 45 second up yet?
It's not, but I'm going to stop you. I'm going to stop you right there, Phil. That's part of you sort of hit the nail on the head, right? 45 seconds seems like such a short amount of time when I say you only have 45 seconds. But when I force you to say no, 45 seconds feels like an eternity, right? So talk to me about, even just the two of you, from the perspective of playing that, what were some roadblocks to creation? So I've asked you to create an app. From what I could hear, we did not fully create an app. In fact, by the end, we kind of had another first idea for an app. What were some of the frustrations or challenges to that?
See, to me, there's no frustration speaking with Phil. He's a gem. So I adore him. And I think that just the chance to have a conversation, to do it with somebody you respect and like, makes it easier. And then opposed to a random, as opposed to a random stranger. I think it makes it easier. I think it depends sometimes who you're paired with, whether you're face to face in a professional setting, and how uncomfortable you are with being uncomfortable.
And I think you experienced where I got uncomfortable was at the end. I ran out of what other no idea could I come up with? I went blank.
See, I loved your ideas. We went multicultural, we went inclusive,
Well, it's also, I just want to make this observation. Like, clearly you're both wonderful people and this is a wonderful group, because I could feel the energy of you're being forced to say no, but both of you really wanted to be accepted, right? You could feel even the ideas were like, you were trying to find a way to say yes, even though you had to say no, which was endearing to watch. It was like, wow, I've just learned a lot about these two people and their character and who they are as human beings, because it was the desire to accept and affirm stuck in this sort of structure of having to say no. Good. And ultimately what you ended up with, Phil, and you just alluded to the frustration, is you get there because you're like, oh gosh, I have to come up with another idea. You were never allowed to end, right? Because you didn't say yes, there's no possibility to end. You had to restart with a first idea every single time. So this is what we see. We see this all the time. We probably work with these people as well, that we want to say no. We want to say no. They're usually the same people who bring a cathedral to a meeting. I'm here to say no to ideas unless they are reflective and affirming of my own ideas. So that's the frustration, is when you say no to one another, you're essentially all just starting over with a first idea every single time that you try to create. And that gets in the way of brainstorming and ideation. Awesome. All right. Well, hey, thank you, Melanie, and thank you, Phil. I'm going to take your spotlights off, and I'm going to see if there are two other people who want to hop up and do something somewhat similar.
I saw Patty come up, so if she still wants to do that, yep. And then if someone else wants to join Patty, who wants to join Patty? Okay.
George, Patty, and George. I got George's hand here. Awesome, George. All right, I am going to, let's see. Hey, George, if you can put your video on, then I can spotlight you, which will be awesome. Cool. That's terrific. All right, so Patty and George, thank you so much for doing this. I'm a little bit stuck because of just how poor I am. And I'm pretty sure I just lost my job at Apple because we didn't come up with anything. So I'm hoping this next one works out. No pressure. But I also work for Sony Pictures, and we develop movie ideas, summer blockbusters, and 'tis the season, right? We got to get these things. We got to get these things greenlit. We got to get them produced. They got to go to post-production so that they're ready to roll out in the summer. So I was eating lunch today, and Sony called me. They're like, we need a new movie idea, Will. And I was like, oh, today is tough. First of all, I'm trying to create an app for Apple. Then I got to teach. And then I'm hanging out with these awesome people from Social Sales Link. You know what? I'm going to be in a room with 42 of the most creative people that I've never, ever met before. I bet you they could help. And Sony's like, yep, totally, go for it. I was like, this is a weird question. Apple had rules. Do you have rules? They're like, you better believe we have rules. Same thing. First person's going to offer an idea. Then everything after that is going to begin with the phrase, yes, but. Yes, but.
Yes, but.
Yes,
Okay.
but. Yes, but. So for instance, I might be creating a movie and I might say, hey, you know what? It should really star Matt Damon. And then imaginary Will might say, yes, but not Ben Affleck. And then I might say, yes, but they're kind of a package deal. And then I might say, yes, but Ben's a terrible actor. Right. And so on and so forth. I'm sorry for anyone who's a huge Ben Affleck fan. So on and forth. So the phrase is yes, but. Now, here's the thing. You're not going to be surprised. Patty, I'm going to ask you to go first. You only have 45 seconds to come up with this movie idea starting now. Go.
I think we should do a movie with kids and bunny rabbits.
Yes, but bunnies leave a lot of, they poo a lot. So I'd rather go up with some dogs.
Oh, but dogs bark a lot. So why don't we have cats then?
Cats. It's difficult to herd cats. They can never get them together in the same place.
But but we could put them on leashes.
Have you ever seen a cat on a leash? I saw it once in the subway in the city. It doesn't work.
Yes, but if you had the cat whisperer as your backstage, cat herder, I think it would work.
Yes, but I prefer actually subway bunnies.
Okay, that's 45. That's 45 seconds right there. Okay, let's make a couple of observations. George and Pat, I'm going to ask you first. Anything that you found was difficult in creating something together with the structure that you were offered?
It was remembering to say yes, but. That was
okay, nice. Anything else?
I would agree. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, George.
No, I would agree. It was yes, but and then comes something that counteracts the continuity. Whatever she picked up on to continue the flow, so to speak, to keep it in the same path, if that makes sense. Gotcha.
Yeah, I refer to yes, but as a Trojan horse often. It's a really creative person's way of saying no. Mm-hmm. Where it's those people that we work with, right? That want to convince you that they're a yes person or they're an accepting person and they're an empowering person, but they really want their own ideas to come through. So they use yes, but instead of no, because they feel like it's almost a form of manipulation that way. Of saying yes, but my idea is going to be the one we go with. Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right. Hey, Patty and George, thank you very much. Thank you very much for doing that. I'm going to take your spotlight off and I'm going to ask for just 2 more people that want to raise their hand and join us here to do something similar. Stephen, awesome. All right, Stephen, thank you very much, Stephen. And it looks like Holly. Awesome, great, Stephen and Holly. All right, Stephen and Holly, you can probably see where this is going. I'm going to spare you the spiel about me being poor. And if you still believe that I have all of these jobs, I've got some land to sell you in Florida. But here's the deal. What you're going to do, my favorite job of all of the jobs I have is that I design roller coasters for Six Flags. Okay, so today I'm going to ask you to help me do that, to build a roller coaster together. You're going to follow the same rules. You're going to go back and forth, but everything after the first idea needs to begin with the phrase yes and. Yes and. Yes and. So first idea, Stephen, I'm going to ask you to offer the first idea. Everything after that begins with the phrase yes and then add. Makes sense? So here's the deal. You only have 30 seconds. Create the best roller coaster you can starting now. Go ahead.
This roller coaster needs to be absolutely just death-defying.
Yes, and it has to be taller than any other roller coaster that's ever been built.
Yes, in fact, I think that it needs to be taller than Mount Everest if we can find the supplies for that.
Oh, yes, and we can find the Sherpas for that, because that's going to make a great photo op, right? You're going down screaming with the Sherpa next to you.
Yes, absolutely. And I also think that we need to make sure that the Sherpas bring along a lot of oxygen bottles because you can't really breathe up there.
Yes, yes, it's very difficult to breathe. And they should have, can we include, let's include llamas, right? Can we, because llamas carry heavier stuff.
Cool.
Maybe
I'm
let's-
gonna stop you right there. As much as I would like to see how much further we went with the llamas. Awesome. So here's the thing. Stephen and Holly, I'll ask you first. Anything you notice as far as the ability to create with that structure that was offered you and being forced to say yes and?
I just noticed it was very affirming both ways, made you feel like you were cooperating with the other person and that you were kind of along the same lines and building onto an idea versus my idea is better or that won't work.
Cool. Let me ask this, Holly, and then I'll get your thoughts. Stephen, at any point did you think, you can just thumbs up, thumbs down. At any point did you feel like your idea wasn't valued, right? Because it was added onto, or that it got dismissed, or it wasn't worth being sort of entertained?
No, it felt value. I felt affirmed.
Awesome. Awesome. Holly, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I felt smart because they actually like he said yes and we could kind of go in the same direction, and then if we went in another direction, it was like, yeah, that direction's good too.
Absolutely. I love that you just said I felt smart. I don't know anyone who dislikes feeling smart. And I don't know anyone who, if they feel smart, aren't more willing to take chances to create and to think outside the box. It's when we're told that we're dumb or we're made to feel less than or stupid that we start shrinking back into ourselves. We stop taking chances and we keep just playing it safe and doing the bare minimum. So I'm so glad that that came through there. Any other observations? Anything from the group? Anything you noticed even from watching, from observing, from listening, from participating? Even the differences
Both had
from
really big smiles.
yeah, right. And the body language too was so different from the first two rounds. And it's not just specific to humans. It was the smiles, it was the energy, and it was all of this. It was that front-footed energy, we called it, where our sort of shoulders lean in as opposed to this energy of saying no or yes, but. Awesome. Awesome. Anything else anyone noticed?
I also noticed that that they started talking about roller coasters, but then the ideas were just so free flowing that they went from roller coasters to Sherpas to llamas, and I'm still interested in the llama angle too. But you know, it's people felt free to bring forth their own ideas to contribute, and because everyone else was affirming about it, you know, all these good ideas that people felt good about got tossed into the hopper basically. And, you know, and all that happened in 30 seconds. And there were several ideas introduced just within that 30 seconds.
That's a wonderful observation there. And I want to ask a question to Stephen and Holly here too. Try to imagine for a second that at the end of all of this, we've got our roller coaster, taller than Everest. There's Sherpas, there's llamas, there's oxygen bottles, there's everything that we need. Imagine for a second that even though your idea, Holly, was that it had to be taller than any other roller coaster, okay? Let's say we get to the finished product and there's another taller roller coaster in the world. Are you devastated by that?
No, I mean, I'm a marketer. I could still do the Sherpa thing and just call it. Yeah. So no, like it.
Yeah, and who
The
cares?
other things
The
you can still
product.
do.
Yeah, we got llamas, right? We got llamas, we got, so it's the notion, yes, and also pulls away the threat of other people's ideas, you know, and I'm sure whether we want to admit it or not, we've all felt that to a certain extent of we hear another idea and it's a threat to our own or to our ability to share our ideas. And that disappears in something like this. All right, I'm going to take your spotlights off. Anything else that anyone noticed in there? Any other observations?
So Will, David over here. So you used language, and the language started off with no, and then it went yes, but, and then yes, and. So is it as simple as the languages you use when you're working with the team? And it goes obviously beyond language, because, you know, anybody can use language But if there's no real meaning behind the language, no real intent behind the language, it's just language. That's what I saw. You went 3 different levels of language, with the last being the most affirmative, and all of a sudden, big change. That's what
Yeah.
I witnessed that in the past couple of minutes.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you made the note of it's beyond just the language. We've worked with a number of companies. The best ones that we work with adopt the ideas and the practice. The ones that maybe didn't get as much only adopt the language, and it becomes ineffective for them. I'm sure we all feel this way too. When it's just words, we have a different reaction. It's easier to roll our eyes to it. And it's why we take the language and then we give it the experience as well, so that you experience what negation feels like when you're trying to create something. You experience what manipulation or disguise feels like when you're trying to create something. And then you experience what affirmation feels like when you're trying to create something. And we go from feeling the pressure of having to offer a first idea every time to feeling smart, to echo what Holly said, right? And that what the potential that comes with feeling smart is unbelievable. And part of that's because we're conditioned, right? Since we were little kids, it's been a measure of whether or not we're smart or not. So that's in us a little bit, so that we respond to that, to be sure. But nonetheless, again, I've never met somebody who felt smart and then became sheepish or llama-ish. Cool. Bryn, go ahead.
The one thing that I recognize, and this is, has been in my head for years now since I started working with you, but nothing gets done with no and yes, but you don't get anywhere. There's no solution.
Mhm.
So there is no true collaboration without yes and. It's a farce. If you're not in yes and, it's not a collaboration. So if you think that well, I could do yes, but and we'll still get somewhere, only if you put your foot down and say this is the way it is, because you never get to the collaboration part. So that's just kind of that was my major takeaway, is without yes and, there is no real collaboration.
And to echo something in there, Brent, too, is the thing with yes, but is what you will get is a really long process that doesn't ultimately end in anything. So you're spot on. You can't achieve anything with yes, but, and what you get, which is even worse, is a ton of wasted time, because that's typically the longest process of those 3, because there's deception that is ultimately happening, whether it's active or not. And then the end game ends up being the same as it was for no. Awesome. All right. What I want to walk through real quick is, and the deck that I'll share with you has a game that you can play if you have a team, and I've spelled it out for you in such a way and giving you a few pointers. The game is infinitely better if you have a team in person, to be sure. So like, use it for your own teams without a doubt. You can use it on a virtual platform, especially if it's a reliable one. But yeah, so that's a little gift for you. If you go to play it and you're like, I don't know it, just reach out to me. I'm happy to walk you through it. I just wanted to give you a sort of a little gift that you could take and you can apply and use for your own teams to sort of make them stronger. And you'll see that it's a celebration of yes and. But I wanted to get to 3 brief ideas. Some of them are an echo of what we've already talked about that can help you specifically in your work life. And those, the 3 ideas are yes and, which we've already covered, the idea of no mistakes. But the third one is what I want to really lean into. And it's this notion of listen, then react, right? Listen, then react. And this is something that we talk about all the time in improv, is this notion of listening and then reacting, because we fall into this trap, whether it's in sales, whether it's in a meeting, whether it's brainstorming, ideation, whatever it is that we're doing, we fall into this trap of responding before we actually listened. This is an echo of yes, but too, because with yes, but I always talk about, if you have a sentence that is a yes, but type sentence, you don't hear anything before the but. So when somebody says something, and this is an old adage that everyone knows, is your hair looks so nice today, but we're going to have to let you go. You don't leave there going, well, they love my hair, right? And that's an extreme example, but you don't hear anything before that but, as soon as that but comes out. And this is sort of a continuation of that idea. If we don't listen, if we don't fully listen before we react, we run the risk of reacting to something that wasn't actually said. So there's this concept in improv called listen, then react. And that's ultimately what it all comes down to. And it's a way of saying yes and, is to fully listen to something and then offer our own reaction to it, but not to try to jump the gun. How many times have we been in situations, whether it's in a meeting with a client, whether it's in a pitch, whether it's in a board meeting, whether it's in, and somebody starts saying something, okay? And what they say makes you think of something. So now all of your energy is on the thing you want to say because they've just triggered something in your brain. Well, here's the thing about human nature. Oftentimes what we start saying is just a filler to build up the confidence to say what we really want to say. So we'll start talking about whatever it might be, my dog, start talking about my dog. And what I'm really trying to do is buy myself time so that I can build up the courage to say whatever it is I actually want to say. So it might be something like, but just to stick on the theme, I've decided it's time for me to move on from this company. And then we've been focusing on the dog because we've now got a story about our dog because they've talked about their dog in the story. And they're finished saying what they've said. And you go, yeah, that makes me think of Sparky. And the other day when he got out and he peed all over the neighbor's car. And it was just hilarious. Well, this person just bore their soul and said that they're ready to leave the company. And you are sharing a story about your dog peeing on a car because we haven't listened through, right? And this opens up this notion of something that I really like a lot is the idea that everything you ever need, improv specifically, but this applies to sales, applies to business. Everything you ever need exists in the other person. Now that's scary because it requires an immense amount of trust. But sometimes we go in so focused, prepared, sort of married to whatever it is, a presentation, whatever it is. And then we get in there and the person is sending us something completely different. And we're so stuck to what we've done that we don't recognize that. When reality is everything we need exists in the person across the table, next to us, whatever it is. And we see this in scenes all the time. The best safety net we have is one another. But we see it across the table as well. That person is telling you everything you need to know as far as closing that deal, as far as establishing that relationship, and it goes beyond their words, right? When we say listen, we're listening to what they say, but we're listening to how they're acting, their body language, how they're sitting, all of those things. And that's it. And we know this as human beings. Rarely are we saying the exact words that are a representation of how we're actually feeling. So we say all of these things. And if the person on the other side isn't listening or deeply listening, it can be a powder keg. And this is another thing, again, in relationships. So in romantic relationships, in friendship relationships, in business relationships, and client relationships, it's all the same. The amount of times, how many of you who might be, involved either with a friend or with a romantic partner have the same fight about listening, right? It is always about listening and communication. You always have the same fight. You're not listening to me. No, I am listening to you. You just said this, this, this. Yes, but that's not what I meant. Gotcha. I was reacting before I was listening. So that's just another thing in there that I wanted to share. So these ideas, I'll share this with you too. Obviously the idea that there's no mistakes, only opportunities, the yes and how we can translate into a pitch, a sale, but most importantly, a relationship. So this will be available for you as well. I want to leave time for any questions that anyone might have. We've got about 5 minutes left. So I'm happy to offer anything. Please consider me a resource from this point on. My email is in that information. My phone is in that information. My cell number is in that information. That's what when I get to sort of pass this on and just sort of be a resource, be a guide for anyone, consider it done. So if you have questions, if something comes up after the fact, please reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn, any social media. I'm happy to be there for you. For me, this is, improv has changed my life for the better in so many ways that anytime I can even drop a morsel of that into somebody else's lap, I'm happy to do it. But any questions, anything that I can shed some light on, anything I can clarify?
Well, I'd have you guys raise your hand if you have questions. What I want to add to this is if you think Will would be good for a sales kickoff that's coming up, if you, whether it's your company or your client's company, I'm just refer him, introduce him. I cannot tell you the value that he brings. He's brought to my life, significant. So I want you really as a thank you to him, because this was amazing. Was this amazing? I want you to think about, even if you have a small company, but you serve companies with sales teams, please consider introducing him to do January, February, March, or sales kickoffs. He'd be an amazing keynote. So, okay. Now questions, raise your hands if you have them.
Thanks, Brent. I'll Venmo you that $50 as soon as possible. I see a question here. Let's see. Who's got a question? Sometimes I can't even see.
It's Patty.
Patty, you got a question.
Did I miss it? But you said you were going to introduce a game for the team.
So it's in the deck, which has been shared with you. It's a resource. It is spelled out almost as thoroughly as I can possibly spell it out. So I wanted to give you two things to use for a team. First of all, that building a roller coaster exercise, use that with any team you are involved with, right? That's sort of the goal as far as I'm concerned. Bryn echoed that same sentiment in the beginning. But then I offered you another game that you can use in person with a team that sort of builds upon those things. And it's simple, but you'll see it's spelled out, and it's just a notion of sort of someone becoming an expert, but three people trying to make sentences together, one word at a time. And then hilarity ensues.
I put a link to all three of Will's resources in chat. Bill had put it in a couple times. I just stole his link and put it in again. So you can go ahead and click on that, and you can download. Let me see, all set. Yep, all set up to be able to download. Thanks, Bill.
Greg, I see your question in the chat, and then I see Melanie has a question too. Greg, I didn't mention a ton more about, but I'll offer this, and don't quote me on this actual study because I'm paying it forward from somebody else, and I will find it. But it's interesting to note that in communication, only 7% of what we communicate is through words. So if our communication is 100%, 7% of that is through the actual words that we use. And then the rest is physicality and body language and expression. And I think body language is somewhere around 65, 70%.
Yeah, it's
and
high.
So it's something to be mindful of. Even something as simple as posture, which mine is awful, but something as simple as posture and presence, right? And this is where the improv and mindfulness cross over a ton. That's a whole other workshop. But that notion of being present, that's the easiest way. The easiest way to improve body language and expression is to be present, which is one of the hardest things to do, right? But if you're present, the rest kind of takes care of itself. Your body and your brain are really smart, and they're really good at working together so that when it knows that you're present, it responds as such. So that's even, I would say that's even better than the old, here's a stack of books to walk with on your head. It's also safer. So there's that. Melanie, you had a question.
You partially answered it. For people who are kind of stuck in the mud, like teams that, what's a nice way to say it? The team leader is inflexible, basically, or you have the passive aggressive kind of person in the room. How would you introduce this in a way to get buy-in?
Wow, that's it. So that's awesome. I lean into the building a roller coaster exercise. And that's kind of a cheap answer because we just did it, but because it offers the experience of the potential, it just needs to be followed up. So in that situation, one, education. So share the information. There's some science that I can also share with you as well, specifically if you want to reach out, that just supports the use of this kind of thing. Case studies. Look at any company look at Google, look at Yahoo, look at Pepsi, look at all these companies. They're using this. So it's not like it's some unknown, unproven commodity. The success rate is phenomenal. So a lot of times if there's somebody who's resistant, it's because they don't believe it can work. So you can point to that to let them know that it works. And then as far as being stuck, real quick, there are two other things. Anytime you're stuck creatively, here's a quick thing to help break you of that. Walk around your room and reassign everything a new name that is not its actual name, right? And you can do it with gibberish. Usually I do gibberish. So I just make up a language and then I name everything in my room, or I just reassign it different names that have nothing to do with it. That's a great way to break a creative block. And then another thing that I will offer as a little gift here, though it would be part of a whole other workshop as well, is this notion, announce your truth. So when you find yourself stuck, we talk about this being the easiest way when you get stuck in a scene or a game in improv is to announce your truth. And it's just something we don't take the time to do often in life, is just to be able to stop and say, okay, I am who I am where I am, and I'm doing what I am doing. And whatever those things are, we call it a platform in improv, but whatever those things are, just announce it. Announce it, and it can be liberating. It frees it up, and it also cues the rest of your team that you're in a position where you need help, even if you're not the best person at asking for help. So it's a safe way of asking for help, is announcing your truth, because it's announcing exactly where you are, and it lets your team know where you are as well.
And if I can throw in one more thing, send them a link to the replay of this recording.
There was one more question in the chat that Joan asked, are we supposed to say yes and to a bad idea?
Yes, because there's 10% of a good idea in there. It's actually this is weird, Joan, but I find it often with a bad idea, it's easier to say yes and sometimes than it is no, because remember, yes and is participation and contribution. So look, there's bad ideas. There's bad ideas out there, right? And there's usually 10% of a good idea. But what you do when you yes and is you make that idea better. So it can start as a bad idea and then develop into a really good idea. All you're doing is valuing the human and their ability to have an idea, right? So that you're not negating someone and shutting them down in such a way that they'll never be productive or contribute or be creative again. You're saying, all right, I value you as a human being. Let's see if we can make this idea as best as possible. And look, here's the reality. I don't want you to think this is all like, yes, yes, yes. You're going to get to a point where you ultimately have to say no. That's fine. You got a yes and first. So give it its respect, give it the due process of going through yes and then you might get to it and be like, yep, it's not feasible. We've yes and to the point where we realize it doesn't work.
Well, sometimes with my kids, I work the yes and I'll yes and let's talk through that. Yes and what are the pros and cons of that, right? And they can talk themselves out of it, right? But I haven't said no to anything they asked. So that's been very effective.
And I mean, I'm using it in overtime right now with a 2-year-old. And you're seeing it from a different end of that sort of perspective, right? You're at not the opposite end, but you're at a further along end.
Freshman in college and a daughter that made me a grandma.
There you go. And it is, I mean, it's brilliant. What you just hit on is you don't have to say no to anything. So they can't get mad at you. They can't get frustrated by you saying no.
Right.
They've talked themselves into a better idea or to the point of realizing that idea wasn't going to work out. But it's also, it's PR 101, communication 101 is validate concern. The first thing you always do is validate. So if somebody's coming with something, in this case, we're not typically talking about concerns, but it can be, validate it first. It doesn't cost us anything to validate somebody.
Right.
It's the easiest thing to do. That is, it's a life hack. It's a relationship hack. It's a business hack. Just validate somebody, affirm another human being, and then move on from there.
And for the record, it usually ends up with just take an Uber. I'm sorry. No, actually not totally true, but that, thank you, Will.
Oh, thank you. So much
I cannot wait till your next class in person. We actually, one of my very close friends from college was on. I think she's not on now, but she lives in Bucks County. So I'm going to push that she
Oh, nice.
join us. But you know, you have such a place in my heart, and I so appreciate you. And I'm so thrilled to have shared you with everyone. Please connect with Will on LinkedIn and refer him. There's no better thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to all of you. So go forth and yes, and you can't see it, but right there, Hamilton quote, how lucky we are to be alive right now, right? That's the yes end of all yes ends. So
I just
thank
got
you so
chills.
much.
Thank you. We'll talk
Take care.
soon.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Thanks so much, Bryn. Take care, everyone.